Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and here with me is Omar Pozos, my co-host and husband. How are you doing today, Omar?
I'm doing great. It's a great week. We just celebrated Christmas, so this episode will be coming out right before New Year's, right?
Yeah. Last episode of 2024.
Yeah. So I'm very excited. Had a great day with family at Christmas. Made a prime rib. Had some great cinnamon rolls and pies and
all the good things.
I'm feeling very, very. I was going to say full, but
full belly, full heart.
Yes, exactly. How about you? How are you doing?
Yeah, same.
What was your favorite part about Christmas this year, would you say?
Oh, man. Getting to just, I feel like just all the fun little games and stuff we'd play with our niece and nephew and just, I don't know. Family time. I just love family time.
Yeah. I'm gonna name myself the hot potato champion, even though you guys were cheating.
I think this is like the second time you've talked about hot potato on the podcast, which is
it's my favorite game.
Yeah, super fun. Well, on today's episode, we're taking a little bit of a mindset approach to this episode, and this is a topic I often really enjoy talking about. So if you're a longtime listener, you know that I'm really passionate about talking about our relationship with food and our relationship with our bodies. That's actually a big part of our mission in our coaching at Vital Spark Coaching. Our mission statement itself is actually to transform women's relationship with food and their bodies so the next generation doesn't have to. It's really all about having that kind of generational change and generational impact. And really that does start with teaching women about health, about how to feel like they have a healthy sense of control with their bodies, but ultimately feel at peace in their bodies, feel truly at home in their bodies, and can really just set that example for whether they're current kids, future kids, or just any other young people in their lives now and in the future. And, you know, I've actually been reading a book that I've been really enjoying. It's called 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think. It's by Breanna West. And if you haven't read it before, I highly recommend it. It's a really great read for like I like to read it at night when I can just kind of go through each chapter as an essay itself. They all are standalone. They're all just about all kinds of different topics.
Is it essays by her or is it essays by different people?
I believe by her, but that's a good question. I'm not actually sure. But it's really great because they are like just standalone, very like deep things to help just give you something to think about. And they're really great to read kind of before bed because I can, sometimes I'll just read one essay and I'll be like, oh man, now I'm just like going to think about this until I fall asleep. And it's a very peaceful type of read. And so actually just the other night I was reading one of the essays and I was like, wow, this is something where I really wish this essay specifically, I could just make like every single one of my clients read this. I could make like anybody I'm helping with their health and fitness read this because I think it was really powerful. And so I thought, I'm going to actually bring this to the podcast. And what we're going to do is actually go through this essay together here. Thanks to, Breanna West, all credit here to the author. So I'm going to read through specifically her kind of points here and then, share a little bit of like my thoughts and my take on this, specifically thinking about, the women that we reach through the podcast, our listeners, our clients, really any women that we get to impact. Just some of the things I would love for you to kind of think about with this episode.
Yeah, let's dive in. I'm excited because I want to read this book. And now that you're starting to bring some of these things to like my awareness, I'm like, I wonder what the next couple of essays will look like.
Yeah, and they're really good because they're all different types of topics. But this essay specifically, so like I mentioned, this one is really around kind of your relationship with your body a little bit. So the essay is titled, "The Little Things You Don't Realize Are Affecting How You Feel About Your Body." And so what she did is she gave 18 different points here that are just things that, could ultimately be affecting how you feel about your body. And I thought this was really powerful because ultimately awareness is the first step of change, right? And we often talk on the episode about how important it is to change your inner dialogue with yourself, to change maybe some of that kind of self-talk specifically around your body, around who you are, your identity, because that work is so powerful for actually changing, our actions and changing our outcomes with our health, our bodies, and ultimately, the trajectory of our lives, right? And a lot of these things that I'm going to talk about from this book here, these are really a lot of things that are influencing how you feel about yourself. I guarantee you for everyone who listens to this, there's going to be at least one thing on this list of 18 that you're like, yeah, that's, either affecting me now or it has affected me at some point in my life. And by bringing awareness to kind of these factors that could be maybe sitting in your subconscious a little bit, it can really empower you to think about what you want to do with that information. Now you bring awareness to it. What do you want to do with it? Is this something where maybe you work with a therapist and you want to dive into this a little bit further with a therapist? Is this something where maybe you want to go and journal about it a little bit and kind of dig in a little bit more, see how this specifically is currently influencing you? Or is it something where you just, now you're aware of it, it's something you just want to like pay attention to and look out for and see if it's something that you do ultimately want to work on or change or just, continue to work on your own journey with your health and fitness. So let's dive in. So the first point from Breanna West here, number 1, so quoting Breanna West here, how your parents felt about their bodies and what they said about them and others, even when you were little or they didn't think you were listening. So goes my favorite saying, the way we talk to our children becomes their inner voice, end quote. So this one I think is not a surprise probably for a lot of people. We've talked about this quite a bit on the episode as well. I think most women that we talk to can trace back in some form or another to their childhood of how their kind of like patterns with their body, with their health, with, dieting, a lot of that does come back to, what they heard as a child, what they were, influenced by those people around them. And I think as you are maybe working on your own health, it's so important to be mindful of how you're speaking to yourself about your body. And, whether or not you plan to have children one day or you currently have children, or there just may in some way be young people in your life at some point, like I mentioned before, really just always imagining that those small little ears are around you at every moment, hearing that inner dialogue of what you're saying to yourself and really just challenging yourself and thinking about, would I want those small ears hearing that thing that I just said to myself or thought about myself? And I think that alone can really help you start to maybe shift some of that dialogue.
Yeah. One thing, and I love this quote because you're right. We have talked about like our own childhoods and like, the 90s obsession with like low fat this or low carb this, right? But one thing I want to really emphasize specifically on this point is, at the end of the day, like we were given the cards that we were given the parents and the childhood that we were given, and there's nothing we can do about it. But now that we're older, now that we're able to make decisions for ourselves, we can very much dispute these thoughts. We can very much dispute these beliefs. And so, again, as you were saying, it's the awareness factor. It's you just listening to podcasts like this or doing inner work with your therapist or by yourself. But again, you don't have to keep doing these things. You don't have to believe these things. You can very much dispute and you can argue, in a different perspective when it comes to stuff like this,
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, number 2 from Breanna here. Photoshop's so good you don't even realize there is Photoshop, and so your perception of normal is totally skewed, end quote. Yeah, this one, is big, especially with like the modern day. I mean, just looking at Instagram Photoshop is like a term that we generally use, but there are so many apps, there's AI, there's all these different things that can manipulate and change how, photos and videos are being presented. Like there's, who's that guy that we've followed on Instagram before that will like out people for their editing. And oh my gosh, it's wild how good some of these like influencers or just people on Instagram have gotten at editing not only photos but videos to completely change how their body looks.
You want to hear something crazy, totally off topic, but there was a reel that I saw the other day where AI generated a video of a person and they were trying to use it as a scam. Long story short, they were trying to sell this person's home without their authorization.
Oh, wow.
And the real estate was like, well, let's get on a Zoom call with them. And the old lady was like an AI generated bot. And they're like, are you okay? Is this real? And anyways, ended up being a scam. But it's crazy what these things will do now.
Yeah. it's the reality of social media, even if it isn't like edited. Like I don't edit my photos. I'll put that out there. I do not edit my photos. But I do, of course, like anybody, you choose the photo that you feel the best about. Yeah. I do try and mix in some things here and there that are like, hey, here was a photo I didn't really want to share because I didn't like the way I looked here. But, just want to also keep it open that like I don't look perfect in all my photos. I am a very imperfect human. But that being said, Instagram is a highlight reel. And I'm specifically zoning in on Instagram, but all of these social media aspects that we all live in, it is a highlight reel. And with that, it is filled with sometimes maybe photos that just aren't even real. And so if that's what you're always looking at, that becomes your kind of
comparison.
Your comparison point for what is real and what is normal. Then you have to take a step back and you have to remind yourself, that might not be real, but my body is real. And the work I'm doing on my body is real. My, hormonal imbalances are real. My metabolic dysfunction is real. And these are real things that I'm actively really working on. And if you're finding that the things that you're seeing on social media and other places are skewing kind of how you feel about yourself, it might be a good time to take a step back and maybe add other people onto your social media page that give you some other perspectives of different body types, different versions of what health can look like, things like that too, to just make sure you do have varying perspectives.
Yeah, or even on the comparison side of things, I mean, you can be comparing yourself to somebody that's been doing this for 20 years and you're never going to have the same results, or you're never going to look the same or have the same lifestyle because you're comparing your chapter 1 to their chapter 50, right? And all of that comes into play too.
Absolutely. Number 3, quote, the attitudes of the first people you dated / were intimate with, and whether or not they appreciated your body for the completely awesome thing it was and is. For whatever reason, people's body hangups can often be traced back to those initial experiences, especially if they were negative. End quote. Yeah, that's a powerful one. I think a lot of, working on your relationship with your body and kind of bringing awareness to those things, a lot of it does come from unlearning some of these early experiences and really realizing that your worth as a human being goes so far beyond your appearance and what somebody else sees on the outside. But, again, kind of going back to whether it was just younger years where, your brain was still forming, these are very formative things that could have happened in those younger years that could still be kind of some of that inner dialogue. But the reality is, true connection is really about that more emotional depth. And I think that's something we have to actively remind ourselves of.
I got nothing on that one.
Number 4 on our list here, quote, how you judge other people. What you first reach to insult someone with, especially when it's physical, says infinitely more of you than of them, end quote.
I never heard of that. I like that perspective, but it's what you harp on, I bet is what you're probably most insecure about, right?
Yeah, well, people, they talk about how, you've probably heard before of the things that you're drawn to in other people are typically the things that you actually love about yourself. And the things that you dislike about other people are things that it can be shadow parts of you. It might be things that maybe you do or have done or don't allow yourself to do that you kind of have these standards and perspectives on. But yeah, I mean, ultimately it is every single person is, I always love the quote, every person you meet is a mirror to meet yourself. Every experience you have with another person is ultimately some reflection of your own inner dialogue about probably something to do with yourself.
Wow.
And this one is a big one. So if you're catching yourself, if maybe you're in a stage right now where you're I am actually working on, I want to love myself. I want to have a better relationship with myself. I want to, love how I feel in my body. I'm actively working on these things. And yet you find yourself kind of having maybe some of these immediate thoughts or even outside, outward comments about other people related to their body, how they look. It could just be something where you can kind of take a step back and just pause and reflect on that a little bit. You're human. It's probably going to happen, especially if this is something that you've done your entire life. So don't necessarily be mean to yourself now for yourself having those kinds of thoughts. But if you notice it, if you catch those negative thoughts coming up, just pause, reflect on it. Think about where could this be coming from? What might this be related to? Who else's voice might this be that's actually in my head? Is this something, again, going back to that first point, maybe I picked up on this from a childhood experience where maybe I had a parent or some, figure in my life who did make a lot of comments about other people's bodies and I kind of adopted that myself. Ultimately, if, again, kind of coming back to our mission, if we want to have that generational change, we want our children to speak differently about themselves, to be more accepting of other people, to be truly creating a more loving world, then that does start with us. And that does start with things like us being aware of what we might say about other people, and especially if we're making comments about other people's bodies. I think that's a huge one. So really actively working on shifting to more of that acceptance over judgment and really starting to build more of that compassionate relationship with our own bodies through how we talk about other people's bodies.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as you go through these, the biggest thing, at least for me, even because I haven't seen some of these before, but even just starting with awareness, be like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even think of it like this, or oh my gosh, next time I go to, I don't know, insult somebody, I guess like take a second, be like why am I, why is my brain pulling me in that direction? Like just asking like why, I think can give you so much perspective there too.
Yeah, like, oh, I'm making a comment about their body instead. I'm gonna just be like, they're an idiot.
I guess, yeah.
Totally kidding.
I didn't know where you were going with it. I was like,
he didn't get the joke. Number 5, quote, the way your friends treat their bodies and behave. In this case, it's less about what they say to you or about themselves and much more what you pick up on through their actions. We begin to subconsciously adopt the collective mindset of the group of people we hang out with most. This really goes back to like the power of your environment, the classic quote of like you are the combination of the 5 people you hang around with most. I think this one should be no surprise to people, but it's something to just bring some awareness to. If maybe if you have people in your life, you have friends who talk about their bodies a certain way, talk about dieting a certain way, or really just like critical of themselves and others, it might be something where you maybe think about, can I start to put myself around people who have more of a healthy relationship with their bodies? Maybe they have more healthier actions and behaviors that I ultimately want to adopt for myself.
Or even like somebody just being more understanding and being like, hey, I know that you're going through XYZ thing right now. You're working on yourself. Like, that's okay, right? Instead of being like, why are you doing this? Or, you're counting your calories, or why are you doing that kind of thing?
Exactly. Yeah. Number 6, quote, what media you consume. The books and magazines you read, websites you visit, TV shows you binge watch, all combine to create your concept of what's normal and what's ideal. And you usually derive these ideas from the characters you identify with most, end quote. Yeah, we definitely talked about this one a little bit before with like the social media aspect, but it really just comes down to being intentional about consuming media that displays health and self-love in a variety of ways. I don't necessarily get behind like the health at every size movement, but I do believe in health at multiple sizes. I've experienced this myself, and it's not necessarily always that like smaller means healthier by any means, and there are a variety of shapes and sizes for each person's body that can display health and happiness. And ultimately, we have to keep that in mind, that we can't necessarily see what's going on internally with people when we just look at their outside, how they look. Number 7, your heritage and your hometown. Food is such an integral part of culture. It's largely the thing we socialize around. It is tied to the culture in which you were raised. Emotional eating can start young, and passing judgments about your figure from not ill-intentioned relatives can really settle into your psyche after a while, end quote. Man, food is a big one. I know we've talked about this before, like, coming from different cultures and backgrounds and kind of upbringings and everything, and like how that's kind of shaped some of our like cultural traditions and how we interact with food. And I think it definitely affects how like our emotions are around food and how we feel about our bodies when it comes to food and all those types of things.
Yeah, I think, even for me, and I've shared this on the podcast, but I'm Mexican originally, and I grew up with a mom, like my parents were immigrants, and I'm a first generation immigrant. So, working or growing up in a household where you're supposed to eat everything on your plate, or you're supposed to, eat everything at once, or eat until you're full, or even more sometimes. Like, that stuff has always stuck with me to the point where I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a 32-year-old man. I'm like, I can go and eat or buy treats or whenever I want to. That doesn't mean I have to finish them all in one sitting kind of thing. But little stuff like that you don't even realize, and you come to a point where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, how much my upbringing, my like you were saying, my culture, my hometown, it made such a big impact on all this stuff.
Yeah, like we've said it before in examples of like, oh, just because someone gives you something, a food that's free, or like your work provides a free food, doesn't mean you have to eat it. That like you have to unwind maybe these like deeper beliefs of like, wait, why do I feel like because it's free I have to eat it? And that might come from maybe certain upbringings and things like that.
Yeah.
Number 8. Quote, whether or not you've been in a relationship in which you felt that your connection was more than just skin deep, it's hard to believe that love can exist without hinging on physical expectations until you experience it, and you start to realize that appearance really doesn't matter most. This one is huge, and I think you and I have talked about this before, but on the podcast, But, I've shared with you of like, you were a big part of me coming out of a very unhealthy relationship with food, an unhealthy relationship with my body. And, you kind of standing by me through a lot of changes in my health and my body and all these different things, and never making me feel any less beautiful for different shapes of my body. I think that's huge. And I hope every woman experiences that at some point. And it's just the reality of like, when you're with the right person who really loves you for who you are, you might have first formed a lot of that relationship off of physical attraction, but the physical attraction is still important and necessary, of course, but the true love goes so much deeper than that. And I think that really does translate over into our ability to love ourselves.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. I mean, I always kind of blush, and I obviously
He's blushing.
when you're giving somebody compliments, I think it feels really good. But no, I think a good partner that can support you, that can help you in the good times and the bad times, that's what makes a big difference. So go find yourself an Omar, I guess.
Quote, find yourself an Omar. Number 9, quote, if you are associating fitness with being a means to an end, that end being a different body, as opposed to being something holistic to keep yourself running, pun intended, end quote. This one, I love this because it's so true. I think a lot of people start a fitness journey off of this like place of, I don't feel comfortable in my body, I need to start working out.
Pain.
Especially this time of year. How many people are probably coming out of the holiday season feeling uncomfortable in their bodies, not feeling their best, and they're like, you know what, I got to get back into my routine of working out. I got to start running again, whatever that sounds like. And the reality is, that's not going to serve you long term. You're going to continue to find yourself in those patterns if you're just using fitness as a means to an end, like she says here. So I really do push like trying to work on viewing fitness as a way to care for yourself and a way to take care of your body and just strengthen it and improve your long-term health, and maybe even visualizing yourself in your 80s and 90s and thinking about how different your life experience is going to be at that age if you are actively strength training and working on your fitness now versus not. For me, that's a big part of developing that kind of healthy relationship with fitness.
Yeah, and we just talked about this a couple episodes ago, right? Like pulling yourself out of that, like I'm in pain, into more of like that, seeing that long-term result kind of thing. And I think what that does too is the longevity of thing is this isn't something that you're going to do for 30, 60, 90 days and be like, okay, now I'm good, and for the rest of my life I won't focus on these things. It's an everlasting journey. It's an everlasting, I guess, habits that you have to create, and doing it from this perspective of like, I want to set myself up for my 30s, my 40s, my 50s, whatever. That's, I think, the biggest difference maker.
Absolutely. Number 10, how genuine your friendships are. If you only maintain relationships with people out of convenience, if you don't have anybody in your life to whom you know you are important to for who you are and not what you do for them, your attention will generally be focused on maintaining a physical exterior kind of acceptability, end quote. And that's a big one. I think just ultimately investing in relationships that are really based on that mutual respect and shared values and deep connections, and really just allow you to be truly yourself and have that true sense of self is so important to feeling comfortable in who you are.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I go through this a lot, right? But as we get a little bit older, our relationships, our friendships become much less and less. But it's
more
really
quality over quantity, 100%.
For sure. That's literally what I was going to say. And just focusing on that, like, what's the point of having, I don't know, 20 friends if 18 of them are really shitty? Like, you might as well have 2 really good ones and just focus on fostering those relationships.
Absolutely. Number 11, the comments people yell on the street. Even if catcalls are meant to be complimentary, they still reduce your body to a commodity, end quote. I mean, I think a lot of women can understand that too, especially if you've lived in a city where you've been like catcalled before. It does make you feel very uncomfortable, but also like the deeper message I think that she's bringing here is like how it really does create this like sense of your body is just like a thing to be admired. And the reality is, as you work on improving your health and improving your body image, remember that your worth is not a commodity. It's not for others to judge. Your body is really a home for you to live in and to experience life in, and that's so important to remember. Number 12, how much you understand about health versus genetic build, the fact that we don't ever lose fat cells, they just shrink, and the concept of big versus small, heavy versus light is completely subjective to each person. If you only gauge your body's acceptability by comparison, you'll never be enough. This one, I love this because it really kind of brings back to a lot of the stuff that we talk about of like, your health markers are so much more important than something like a number on the scale or a size of clothing that you wear. So, I mean, like your hormone balance, your energy, your digestion, like all these things are so important. And truly, like when you focus on just chasing feeling good and that health and that wellness, like you're going to end up embracing this more balanced, this more realistic view of health, fitness, nutrition, your body, and you are going to find that sweet spot in your body that feels really good for you and that you really can maintain. And that's what we're ultimately working towards.
Yeah, I mean, and look at that line. So if you only gauge your body's acceptability by comparison, you'll never be enough, because the goalpost keeps moving, or the people you're comparing yourself to, it keeps going. It's a never-ending rabbit hole.
Yeah, I saw a reel once that was like, the gym is actually just a trap. It's a scheme, because it's like you get in there and you think, I'm finally going to be, happier and in my body, and then you're getting healthier, you're getting stronger, but then you realize that like now you just want to get stronger. Now you just want to like get this. And now you want to chase this PR. And it's like, it's a trap.
Don't do it. It's a trap.
Number 13, an assignment of good and bad to foods in terms of how they'll make you look, how they'll make you feel, or how good they'll be for you. It skews your idea of what's important for your body in general, end quote. We talk about this one a lot, but foods really are just foods. Some might nourish your body more than others. Some are more nutrient dense than others, but none are inherently bad. It's more of just how you use them that might feel good or bad. And if we do start to assign morality to food, we're really going to develop this unhealthy relationship with food. We're going to stress ourselves out, and we're never going to find that healthy sweet spot for our metabolism and our hormones anyway.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, think of it like this too. Like if you were to teach children, like a 5-year-old, like this is good, this is bad, they're going to stop developing, or they're going to start developing that bad connotation with food. And then like the minute that they have it, they're going to feel really crappy about themselves. Like, so if you wouldn't do it to a 5-year-old, why would you do it to yourself?
If you tell yourself that food is bad, then it's going to start to create that dialogue of, now I'm bad, I ate the food. And that's not a good place to be in by any means. Number 14, not spending any time outside. The sun regenerates your body. We are as solar powered as the foods we eat. And to deny your food that source of warmth and light is to deplete your feel-good hormones and everything else you are built to live in. Love this one because it definitely takes more of a science approach as well. Like the sun is crucial for vitamin D, and vitamin D is a precursor for building hormones. The sun is also crucial for just regulating our circadian rhythm, which is really important for our hormones as well. So it's really like getting outside, enjoying time in nature, whether it's a walk, just sitting in the sun, whatever that is, really simply just giving that to your body will absolutely develop more of how you feel about yourself on the physiological level too.
I'm smiling over here because think of it, a perfect scenario is our dog, right? And I think if you have pets, just look at it. Like our dog loves sunlight. Like she just craves it. We'll be out there and like she has a black colored fur, so we always joke that she's tanning out there. But that's how like important it is that like animals will seek it. So again, it's that all of those good feeling hormones that your body produces it from just sitting outside and just literally getting some sun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes I think taking notes from animals like that is a really good thing to do for sure.
She also licks her butt a lot, so probably
don't
not
take note of that. Number 15, not having anything more important to base your self-worth on. When you don't feel like you have anything more important to offer the world, it's inevitable that you get stuck on what's most easy to see and judge, end quote. And this one's big. I mean, I think if you aren't actively working on developing the things that make you unique, and not even necessarily developing, but just honoring the things that make you unique, whether it's, your talents, your kindness, your personality, your character traits, your, energy that you bring into the world, those are the things that make you who you are. It's not how you look on the outside. And we have to actively remind ourselves of that. So really focusing on those things, honoring those things, showing gratitude for those things is so huge.
Yeah. You know what came up for me on this one? Like the not having anything more important to base your self-worth on. Core values. Like if you don't have your own core values, if you don't know what you stand for, if you don't know what you like, what you don't like, then it does become very easy to get stuck on what's most easy, which is your physical appearance. Yeah.
That's why we do some of that deeper work with our clients. We do core value work, things like that. It's so important. Number 16, unrequited love. It's easy to pin something physical to being the reason someone isn't interested, but someone who only loves you when you're 20 pounds thinner is not someone who you want to be with anyway, end quote. I mean, we talked about this one a little bit earlier as well, but like if someone doesn't appreciate you because of your body, it's not about you. It is absolutely about their own biases, their own, limited view of what's important. And that right person will love you for who you are and will love all of you. And, like I talked about, like Omar really was the person who taught me that. And I think sometimes it does take someone else actually giving you that. But I really think we have to start by giving that to ourselves and giving that to another person too. Loving them unconditionally.
First. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Get you an Omar.
Second time said on here, so. Number 17, the constant attention given to celebrities' bodies, how frequently you consume it and how seriously you take it. Whether they're bouncing back after having a baby or simply going through the ebb and flow of life, they're under the kind of scrutiny that would almost make it seem that obsessing about 10 pounds after you've had a baby is normal. Part of their job is to endure this, and it's terrible, but you don't need to be another person entertaining yourself with it. It's not helping anybody. Hold yourself to your own standard, end quote. Man, that one's big. I think about like when I was younger, and I feel like that was when like the celebrity, gossip magazines were so huge, and it was like people would just like pour themselves over like, oh my gosh, how fast has she bounced back after having a baby? And it's crazy. It's ridiculous. And nowadays,
my favorite ones were, sorry to cut you off, were like they'll spot a celebrity in the ocean. They're like,
oh
look
my
at
God,
this person's
terrible
legs and this and that.
I cannot imagine, honestly, what, a lot of those women and those celebrities have gone through. And ultimately, it's just a good reminder for ourselves to notice if we're like really getting caught up in that type of content, more of like that social content, whether it's like influencers that you more so follow than celebrities nowadays, things like that, really not getting so caught up in what's happening with their body and what you're seeing and what you're perceiving to be happening, because we also don't know what's actually going on behind the scenes. Someone might be, from your perspective, being like, wow, they're looking really good. And maybe they actually are in a more unhealthy state mentally or physically than they were before. And we don't know that. So just focus on yourself, focus on what feels good for you and your own body, and not what others are doing or thinking. Last one, number 18, forgetting what our bodies were meant to do. Laugh and play and jump and hug and love. And there's literally zero evolutionary advantage in having chiseled hip bones to help you do any of that. End quote. When you ultimately just shift your focus from your body's appearance to its functionality, what it can do for you, how it feels, like all of those miraculous things about our bodies, that's when you really can begin to see your body for how amazing it is and really have true feelings of gratitude and love for yourself, and then allow those feelings of gratitude and love for yourself and towards yourself to fuel the changes you may want to be making with your health, your fitness, the way you're living your life, the way you're taking care of yourself. So that is everything. And I think that's honestly my favorite point on this list. But at the end of the day, with all of these things, it really just comes down to thinking about maybe which one of these, if any of them, really stood out to you as something that has maybe impacted your relationship with your body, and just like let that sit in your subconscious a little bit more. Kind of think about that a little bit of how are you letting that affect you? How are you letting that shape how you view your body, how you approach health and fitness, and think about, is this something that ultimately you want to change? You have the power to do that. It just comes down to your own thoughts and how you go about thinking about yourself and your body. But that's all for this week's episode. I hope that this was helpful for you. If it was, do me a favor, share this with a friend, post it on your Instagram story, get the word out. Let us help other people by spreading this information. And then make sure, if you're not already, hit subscribe so you never miss another episode. We drop an episode every single week and would love to have you listening. Thanks so much. We'll be back next week.
Bye, everybody. Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year.
Woo!